I was the first and only child in my family for a long and quiet 7 years. Although I enjoyed having my parents' attention all to myself, I have to admit it was pretty lonely. So when my parents told me that I would have a sibling, Henrique, I was elated, company at last. And I had always heard my mom talking about how she always wanted to have a girl and a boy, and those would be her children. And so that really stuck with me. When Henrique was born, all I could think about was, okay, now it's just me and Henrique, we're always going to be together, but it's just us. So it was a huge shock for me when in 2015, I had a third sibling, Luis Felipe. And during my mom's pregnancy, we found out that he would have Down syndrome. And although we were very excited to have him, we were very scared too. We had no idea what it would be like to have a child with a disability in our family. And we had never come in contact with anyone with a disability. So it was very scary, but we were so excited to have him. And when he was born, we realized that it's not even a disability. To us nowadays, we just see it as something that makes him different. And he completely shattered all of our perspectives and all of our ideas of what having a child with disabilities, with one or more disabilities, is. And nowadays, he's more commonly known as Lipe, or the happiest child you ever know. So after that, I thought, okay, now we're all done. We were supposed to have just 2 kids, and now we already have 3. We're a pretty big family. And thankfully, I was wrong again. Last year, we were in Boston as I was taking a summer school course. And we decided to take my brother to the Boston Children's Hospital to see how he was doing overall, to see how he was developing compared to kids without the condition. And we scheduled it with one doctor, but in the last minute, we had to be attended by another doctor. Little did we know that it would be a life-changing transition. When we arrived, the doctor started talking to us, and it was really just small talk. Questions like, how are you? Why are you here? Where are you from? What's your family routine like? And all of a sudden, she just turned around and looked at us straight in the eye and said, "You're the family we've been looking for." Naturally, we were a little bit creeped. We were very confused, but decided to listen anyways. And she told us that she recently adopted a child with special needs and decided to advocate for the cause. And so she showed us a page for an NGO that was for adoption and donation for kids with special needs, and more specifically Down syndrome, but also other disabilities. And she showed us the page for a little boy under the alias of Owen. And he's the one on the picture to the right. And we immediately fell in love with him. He was so tiny, we couldn't help but ache to protect him. And from there, she told us that he had been abandoned at birth because he had Down syndrome. He had never been breastfed. He had lost a chance of having a mother because he had Down syndrome. And the idea of that completely broke my heart, because I had a brother with Down syndrome, and having known him all this time made me realize that this is a reality for many kids out there who are abandoned because of their disabilities. And from there, we decided to adopt him. We found out, I think 2 or 3 weeks after that he was about 6,000 miles away from us. He was in Ukraine. And that was minor for us because we had already fallen in love with him, so it wasn't even a big detail for us. And then, as if we didn't already have enough kids, I was scrolling through the website one day, and I decided to look at the other kids available. And I came across a girl under the alias of Isabella, and she had been abandoned because she has spina bifida. And what that means is, for those of you who know what scoliosis means, when your spine is curved, however, it's outwards, so a part of her spine is exposed. And she had also been abandoned because of her disability. And she had been abandoned at the hospital, so what the doctors decided to do is, we're just going to sew up her skin and send her to an orphanage. And that too broke my heart. So I talked to my mom for 2 days nonstop, and she kept telling me, no, we already have too many kids. This is already too much. Your dad is not going to let us do it. And I insisted anyway. So she let us do it. And I have to admit, I had always loved my brother so much, but I was kind of dying for his sister. So after that, it was just a very long, bureaucratic process of my parents traveling to Ukraine and coming back and doing paperwork and going back to Ukraine and visiting the kids. And when we finally got the call and they told us, you're allowed to go to Ukraine and actually pick up your kids, everybody started crying. My mom didn't know what to do. She was shaking. She was saying, I have to call and get the plane tickets, and I have to pack her bags, and I have to do so many things. But overall, it was one of the happiest days of I think it would be considered one of the happiest days of my life. So after that, after we went and we picked them up and brought them back to Brazil, I started thinking about adoption, the entire concept of it, and how I had never thought of it before we had actually adopted kids. And I thought about how that's actually really messed up. I thought about my life plans, and I thought about everything that I had planned for my life and for my siblings' life and for my family's life. And I realized that my plans were, I'm going to build my career, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have my kids, and that's where I caught myself. I had never told myself I'm going to adopt someone, and I had never told myself I'm going to have adopted siblings at some point in my life. And that is because we always have this thing in the back of our heads that's your kid is only your kid if it's your biological child. And that actually made me think of the barriers of adoption and how they work. Well, first one, cost. Even though the US has a foster care system, which is the cheapest way to adopt, it's still very costly for many families to be able to adopt. And second barrier, the bureaucracy and the time that it takes for all of this is just insane. There's so much paperwork involved and there's so much time involved. We luckily only had to go through 6 months of it, but for many families it ends up being 2 to 3 years. And this is, although this is worth it in the end, it may be a barrier for many families. And these are just 2 barriers out of so many that I have considered. But if there's a barrier that we have to face every day, and that I only actually thought about after I adopted, and that I want to break today, that I want to break that I want to break every single day of my life, it is that of the preconceived notion that your child is only your child if it's your biological child. I only have enough time and I only have enough experience to tell you that your child is your child if you give yourself enough. When people talk to us about adoption and about what we did, they say, you have such a big heart. These kids are so lucky to have you. And I keep telling myself and I keep telling them, we're so lucky too, and it's not just us adopting them, it's them adopting us. And it's about everybody giving each other just enough for us to become an actual family, even though there's always the stereotypes of adopted kids not being your actual kids. And I want to tell you a little bit about what it's been like for our family since we've adopted them. Lucas, upon the adoption, on the first day, when we first changed his diaper, we stopped and looked at him, and he was skin and bone. And we felt so bad because he was so underfed, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in days. And that's him after just 10 days with us, and he had been laughing, he had been smiling. He looked just so much happier than what he was like on the first day. And so he adopted pretty quickly. I expected these kids to take so long to actually get used to us, and for us to get used to them. But it turns out that we actually looked like a family from the very first day. And for Luisa, the name that we decided to give to the girl who was initially under the alias of Isabella, she looked so happy from the very first second when we went to pick her up at the orphanage. And every single time she hugs us, to this day, she hugs us as if she understands how we had ended up somehow saving her. Because I assume since she's a very young child, she doesn't necessarily understand yet what it means that we picked her up there, that we brought her to a completely different place. But every time she hugs her, I really feel as if she understands. And Lipe ended up getting very attached to both of them. He is absolutely in love with Lucas. At first, he didn't seem to understand why we had 2 new kids in the family, and he was a little bit jealous, I have to admit. But nowadays, he is so in love with them that I think that he has become dependent on them. And they both always laugh long when they're next to each other, and it's actually really, really beautiful. And last Sunday, January 29th, it was Luis's birthday. And we decided to celebrate Lucas's birthday too because we didn't have a chance to when we were in Ukraine. And I just stopped to look at everybody and look at what that scene looked like. And I didn't see kids who had been adopted. I saw kids who had been there with us since day one. I saw kids who seemed like they had been there with us since forever. And people always talk about how it must be so hard for kids to readjust to a new family, and I didn't see that with them. So for our experience, I can definitely tell you it wasn't hard at all. It was one of the best decisions we have ever made, and it was absolutely life-changing for all of us to have made this decision. And so with all of that, I can tell you, your child doesn't need to be biological to be your child and for you to love them just as much. Your child doesn't need to have your blood in their veins for the child to be yours and for you to love them just as much. And that ends up being a huge barrier for many people who want to adopt to feel like they're going to face prejudice or face people judging them because they adopted or because that child is not theirs. And I can easily tell you right now, that's not going to happen. If you do decide to adopt, not because of this TED Talk, but because you decide that you want to adopt and because it's going to be a wonderful decision for your family, I can tell you it's going to be all right. And it's going to be one of the best decisions you've ever made. There are 140 million children, according to UNICEF, who are out there and who want and need parents. There are millions of people out there who want and need kids, but don't adopt because of this barrier. So let's break this barrier today, because blood is thicker than water, even if the blood is not the same as yours. Thank you.